Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Avorion episode 24. I'm Enigmius, and today we're having a little fun with the Samson. We've been making progress on the hull design. Last episode we added a bunch of equipment to the interior, both of the main hull section and also of the nacelles. And now we have an opportunity to kind of mess around a little bit with the performance of the ship and see where we're at in terms of the basic characteristics. Before we do that, there was a couple of little details that I wanted to take care of. We had all these little connecting spaces between the main hull and the nacelles, and they were basically rectangular, and that, I wouldn't say it was bugging me, but it didn't seem like it would take a whole lot to fix it so that they had a slightly more refined look. So what I'm doing here is I'm placing little strips that will basically serve as locators for the blocks that will define the profile of the upgraded version of these little guys. And you can see now that we've got the strips in place, the profile itself will go together very, very quickly. Now, this would have been an outstanding opportunity to use the copy and paste feature to, once we've placed this profile and merged all of the blocks, and then you'll see we add the slopes to it, and bang, it's done. We've gone from a rectangular shape to an elliptical shape. But the thought never even occurred to me to use the copy and paste until I was on the very last block. So I didn't make you watch the whole process of doing all of them. I just kind of gave you an idea with one of them, sort of where we were at, what we were doing. And then it came time to think about how we were going to set up some of the equipment in the nacelles, because viewer suggestions had indicated that if I had changed the orientation or the alignment or the size of the different directional thrusters that we had on the ship, that we might get better results. So it made sense to me that we would be willing to at least entertain some of these ideas that people had offered. Because why not? We're not getting any results out of it the way that they were set up when I did it. There's got to be something to them. There's got to be a reason to use them because people keep using them. And when I say I'm not getting anything out of them, people don't say, yeah, you're right, they suck. They say, try doing it this way. So that's what we're basically doing, is orienting them or positioning them differently. And one of the things, embarrassingly so, that the thought never occurred to me is that I would have to spin these blocks so that they would be oriented in ways that make sense relative to what we were expecting to get out of them. And in my defense, the reason why I never really kind of got the idea to do that until a little bit later, we'll have it done before the end of the video, but the reason why I never really thought of it is that when you're placing gyros, as you're placing them, it puts a ring around the block to indicate which sort of direction of motion you can expect to get out of that gyro. So if you're going to be getting pitch or yaw or roll, you'll be able to see, without doing anything special, what that block will be set up to do. And then you can adjust the orientation of the block, and it will be reflected in the circle that indicates what axis that block will be acting on. Not so for the directional thrusters. However, they do have ports on them on the sides that they are acting on, and once a person understands this, it's a fairly straightforward process to get them lined up in a way that makes sense. I'm trying to fill in all the spots. You can see I'm struggling to get that skinny little block in there. I'm trying not to leave any voids in the interior sections of the ship, just because it's a spot that could be armored, and not having it armored could mean damage to key systems that we could have otherwise avoided, potentially. So you'll see occasionally fiddling around with little wee tiny sort of things, trying to make them line up the way that I would like them to. One of the things that I've found, and this is particularly relevant when placing extremely large blocks, is that the game gets very, very twitchy. The larger the block, the lower the resolution that you get when you move the mouse. So in order to place some of these really, really huge blocks that I've been placing, I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is place the block and extend it so it's close to the extent of where you would like it to be, and then stop. Then place another block that's just got to go a small distance, because now you're placing a small block. The resolution is much better. When you move the mouse, it's much smoother. You go through the different stages, the different little bumps along the way to the positioning and the size of the scaling of the block, and then you can merge the two, the large one and the small one, and it just works much better that way. Saves a lot of time, because when you get into those large blocks and you're trying to get it to line up flush with an existing face, it's maddening, just the stuff that you have to go through in order to make that happen. So we've kind of given you an idea here what we're working on with the nacelles. We're changing the in this case we're wrongly changing the positioning of the the directional thrusters, and then building around them with more gyros, which in this case is it's impossible to make a comparison what we're getting out of the gyros versus the thrusters, because the thrusters are positioned wrong. They're big blocks, which I've arrived at the conclusion is probably better than a bunch of smaller blocks in the same sort of position. But we've got the gyros tucked in beside them, so if we had them positioned appropriately, the gyros might be in the way, etc., etc. Then I decided that I would like to see some better protection for our engines. You can see in the back here, we got the great big strip of white engine glow. And what I decided to do was something that I've done many times in the past, which is create this sort of slotted vent kind of thing and just see how it works out, if it offers any kind of real protection, or if it's, you know, the mechanics of the game indicate that having these in that particular location counts as blocking the thrusters and that they won't work properly. And all it really amounts to is deciding on the size of a panel, and then you stack them. You stack them, all the panels side by side, until you fill in the spot like we're doing now, until you fill in the spot that you want to fill, and then you go back over it and you delete every second one. And that's the easiest way that I've come across to create this sort of thing. And what I found out as a result of doing this is that the ship's thrust didn't appear to be affected by having the opening to the engines at least 50% blocked off, because we have the every second panel is removed. So whatever it ends up offering in terms of armor, you can see now, this was the sort of the first test with the directional thrusters, with the engines, with the vent things on the back, kind of providing a little bit of extra protection. This thing is bloody fast. Very difficult to control at top speed. I would not say that traveling through asteroid belts at top boosted speed would be an especially wise thing to do, but if you're looking to get around, if you're looking to, for example, get out of a fight, not a bad way to do it. Now you can see, because of the way that I've set up the directional thrusters this time, they're firing on in the nacelles. Those two bright white sort of squares on either side are the directional thrusters. And this was following a recommendation from someone who had suggested that the thrusters might work better if we stacked them up. We just made little thin thrusters and stacked them up, as opposed to having just a solid block of thruster. And the idea being that the surface area of the thrusters would be sort of one of the key things that indicates the performance, whether those thruster elements are exposed or not. My experience, just kind of first of all doing it like this and realizing after the fact that I had done it wrong, and then going back and changing them so that they were oriented properly with that stacked sort of effect, was that it didn't seem to work out that way. The performance that I was getting out of them wasn't especially good. So I removed this stacked version. I reverted back to the large block format, only this time I made a point of ensuring that the blocks were oriented properly. And I've got the ship is set to be invulnerable, which I'd forgotten. And it's very convenient that I had set it that way, because on the way back from our little speed test, I collided with an asteroid, and you may have noticed it kind of sent me spinning. I didn't have to repair it because I didn't have anything to repair. It was invulnerable. So this is good for the testing. Believe me, to get this far with a ship like this in a non-creative environment and then blow it up in a test run would have been kind of heartbreaking. Even if you could load it back in and save the design because of the way the game saves the ships, you'd still have lost out on quite a chunk of materials. I haven't even looked at the material total just yet, but it's going to be up there. The credits and the materials are going to be pretty significant. So we did a little bit of testing. You can, if you happen to see when we're going past the nacelles, we've got those ports showing up on them in the sort of top and the sides and the bottom, indicating that they're facing in the appropriate direction. The gyros are still there because it doesn't look like they're going to be in the way. And then I decided we've got this front section that we can basically still do whatever we want with. The back end is approaching a stage where it's almost finished in terms of the design of the hull, and it didn't leave a lot of room for additional equipment. But the front section, the sky's the limit. There's nothing saying that we can't add anything that we want up front and then just kind of build the hull around it. So I decided to add some more directional thrusters, and you can see those huge blocks that I just placed on the front of the ship are all directional thrusters. I've got lots of directional thrusters for roll, the way that that whole thing is set up. I don't have so much for pitch and yaw. So I think before we're all said and done, you're going to see some of the thrusters that I just placed oriented so that they're facing up. Based on the center of mass of the ship, when they act, they'll be producing better pitch than what we have now. The ones that are facing to this side will be primarily for yaw. And like I say, roll, we've already got lots. Everything is sort of taken care of already. I decided to, you see I'm struggling with this little wedge, trying to get it placed, and just a bit of a spoiler, it doesn't last there for very long. I'm trying to figure out, now that I've added these thrusters, what I'm going to do with the front end, because the way that I had originally planned the front end didn't include these thrusters. It didn't include all this extra space. It didn't include consideration for how these thrusters need to be exposed to open space or whatever theoretically in order to function. So I just start to kind of close things in as best I can, following the existing profiles without necessarily disrupting the access to the thrusters themselves. We'll do one more test before we're all said and done with this video, just so that you can see what it's doing when we scoot around now. I'm actually quite pleased with it, and I'm glad that I took the time now to kind of figure out what we could do with what we have, and the understanding that we didn't even have a full complement of, I think it's either engineers or mechanics. You can see on the right side of the screen at the very bottom of that readout, all of that information, it's in red because we don't have enough currently in this ship to do the job. So we'll probably get even better performance when we max that out. We'll do that probably for the next episode. The long and the short of it is that I think it was well worthwhile to spend a little bit of time messing around with things, seeing what we could kind of come up with, and also doing a little bit of tuning on the ship now before we get much farther along with the overall design of the hull. There's not going to be a whole lot extra that we're going to be adding at this point. The ship is already large enough. We've got a few more details now to fill in than we had at the beginning of the episode because of what we just added. But by the time everything is all said and done, I think this is going to be a really fun ship. If the speed that it was at, especially boosted, remains about the same, and we can put a reasonable assortment of salvage mining and combat turrets so that we can pretty much go around and do whatever we want, I think this could be quite a bit of fun, at least taking us up to the point where we can start gathering materials, the next tier of materials for the next builds, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to let you watch just this last couple minutes, sort of a little test that I did after I messed around with some different profile options for this front end. See what the ship is doing at this stage of the build, and then the next episode we're going to be back to probably finishing off the back end and also doing a little bit of work on the front end, sort of bringing that a little bit closer to completion as well. So if you want to be notified about the next episode, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel and or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.